All right, what I have here is a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to use to review the different parts of the project. In my video introduction, I had explained to you some of the major points of the project, so now we're going to go through it in a little more detail. All right, so in this, first of all, in the course, what I'm teaching you is how financial information is put together so that we have the financial statements. And the financial statements communicate the operating results, the financial position, and also the cash flow, inflows and outflows for an organization. So that the purpose of going through the whole accounting process is to produce these financial statements that people can use for decisions. So the purpose of this project is to introduce you to annual reports and how to read them. And you'll be taught to read them with a critical and analytical eye. And what I hope you will be able to do is appreciate the usefulness of the annual report and how it applies to making financial decisions. The project is divided into 4 parts, and each part has a different due date. And the purpose of this is to break the project down so it's a little easier to get through the project. And as you submit each part, I will be grading each part of the project. As I had mentioned in the introductory video, you will need to select a publicly held corporation and the parameters that you must consider when selecting the company. Just to reiterate what I said before, is you must select a publicly held corporation listed on an American stock exchange, and that could be NASDAQ, the American Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, and their financial statements must be expressed in US dollars. The company must also sell a physical good, so you cannot use a service company like an airline. So to give you an example, Starbucks will be an example of a company that sells a physical good. And as you will see on the syllabus and then on the modules, that you must submit the choice that you've made for your corporation for approval by me, the instructor. All right, in the first part of the project, part 1, this descriptive analysis. This is the narrative you'll be writing. Now I have provided a list of items that must be included in that narrative, and I've numbered them. However, when you write this narrative, you are not supposed to write number 1 and then answer the question. We're not answering questions. You also need to use complete sentences. Do not provide lists. And also, as you will see later on, that part of your grade is spelling and grammar. Also, in the descriptive analysis, provide explanations where needed. So for an example, in part 5, it says evaluate the company's website. Offer 3 commendations and 3 recommendations and explain them. So there's an example. So you're not going to provide lists. In part 8, you are asked to search for 2 recent events that have affected your company. So you would have to do outside research for that. And when you cite your sources, you should use the APA or MLA format. Most of you probably learned the MLA format, but the APA format is the one that is preferred. Alright, in part 2, you're going to be looking at the income statement. And what we have here in this slide is we have an example of an income statement that was taken from a textbook. And this company sells physical goods. And the way we can tell that is we see the line item right under sale, cost of goods sold. This is an example of a multi-step income statement, and we'll talk about that later on in the semester. But just to give you a little bit of background right now, a multi-step income statement involves calculating the profit or the net income in steps. So the steps are gross profit, operating income, net income before income tax, and then finally net income. In parts 2 and 3 of the project, you will have calculations that you will need to do. And when you do those calculations, I want you to use Excel, an Excel spreadsheet, and use the formulas, so that I don't want you to calculate the numbers on a calculator and then just plug them in. So you need to use Excel. Once you have done all the calculations, whether it be ratios or a trend analysis, you have to be able to explain the financials for your company. One of your best friends will be the management discussion section of the 10K that goes with your financial statements. So you definitely want to look at that, because it will give you most of the information that you're going to need. Alright, just want to spend a little bit of time on trend analysis. With trend analysis, and this is part 6 of part 2, you're going to be doing this for items on the income statement. So there is an explanation of how to calculate the changes from year to year. So for example, if you have an income statement for years ended 2014 and 2015, you're going to calculate the dollar change from 2014 to 2015, and then the percentage change, and those calculations are explained to you in part 6 of part 2. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. Part 3 involves an analysis of the balance sheet, and we're also going to look at the statement of cash flow. So for our purposes in this course, we are not going to be preparing the statement of cash flow, but what we will be doing is we will look at the statement of cash flow to see what it can tell us. So there are some ratios that you'll have to calculate, and they are listed in numbers 3, 4, and 5, and also 6. Now 6 is the dividend payout ratio. Your company may not pay dividends, in which case you would obviously not be able to calculate the dividend, but you need to indicate in the paper that the corporation does not pay dividends. And also in the explanation of the financial statements, they should explain why they're not paying dividends. In various parts of this part of the project, you will need to put together tables. So for example, in part 2, it says for each year, please determine the following. There are 4 items, and then underneath it says please present this information in a table, and then underneath comment on any significant changes in any of these items from year to year. Also, with the 4 financial ratios, you'll be presenting those in a table, and then underneath that table provide explanation for changes in those ratios from year to year as well. Alright, so then we come to stockholders' equity. And in terms of stockholders' equity, there are 2 types of stock. There's common and preferred. It's not something we're going to get into right now, but in the course we will talk about the differences between common and preferred stock. And in the chapter 11, that's a chapter on stockholders' equity, so if you need to look up information, you have that. And there are a number of things that you have to do in part 4 with respect to stockholders' equity. So one is, what type of stock does your company issue? And the answers are common and or preferred. Companies If they issue stock, will always issue common and may issue preferred. Sometimes companies are authorized to issue preferred, but they do not do it. So if you look at a balance sheet, you may see preferred stock and then blanks to the right, which means that they're authorized, but they have not issued any. All right. Then you want to look at how many shares have been issued in each year, and if there has been an increase in the number of shares issued from one year to the next. So if they're issuing more shares, what they're doing is they are getting more paid-in capital. And we'll talk about that again later on the semester. So then the question you need to answer is not only how many shares were issued, but also what was the reason for the additional issue? What are they going to do with those funds? And we have, were any dividends declared in the current year? That's another question under the Statement of Stockholders' Equity section of the report. And of course, we've already discussed that you would have had to have found that out for calculating the dividend payout ratio, but it says, were any dividends declared in the current year, and then how do you know this? So you need to answer that. All right, repurchase of treasury stock. Again, treasury stock is something we're going to discuss later on the semester. So corporations may buy back some of its own stock that it had issued to investors. And first you want to see if they did do that, and then the reason for it. And again, all of that information should be provided in paragraph form. All right, so now in the summary, the end of the project, you need to describe the 5 most interesting things you learned about the corporation. Once again, you are not to put together a list. You are to explain each of those interesting things and the reasons that they're interesting and how you feel that they would contribute to the success of the corporation. And then, based on all the analysis that you've done, and based on the information that you would have collected on the stock price, you need to determine whether or not you would buy the stock. And obviously there are 2 possible answers, yes or no. It doesn't matter whether it's a yes or a no. What's important is how you back up your answer. So you need to give your reason for your decision based on your analysis and additional information that you were able to get through research. All right, so that's the project. Now I'm going to go to the grading piece. So the last slide will be the grading grid, and also if you look at the description of the project, there's also a grading grid there. So each part is graded individually, and that there's a maximum point value assigned for each element of the project. And if you look back at the description of the project, and for each component, there is a number in parentheses. That is the maximum points that you can get for each part. So to give an example, what type of stock does your company issue? This is part 4. That is 1 point. If you don't answer that, of course, you will get no credit or a 0 for that. In the grid, the project grade computation, and actually I'm not so sure that I have it on this PowerPoint presentation now that I think about it, but you have it in the document that I provided for you. There are some items: grammar and spelling, presentation and format, and accuracy of calculations. The accuracy of calculations will pertain to parts 2 and 3 in the project. Grammar and spelling will apply to the entire project, and presentation and format will also be graded for the project as a whole. All right, so that is this is my presentation on the project and how to do it. And again, if you have questions, you can put your questions in the question discussion board in the module in which we will be discussing the project, or you can send me an email. Okay, that's it.